What happened was in the 80s and 90s, Vietnam was going through a green revolution. They called it Doi Moi. So it was heavy industrialization of agriculture. So you started to see monoculture, aggressive use of fertilizers and whatnot. And those policies kind of got put in place all around the region, and specifically Laos because it's a close partner. So when we arrived, you really found a generation of farmers that have been raised doing pretty much industrial agriculture, specifically monoculture. There's little tenets of organics that still persists, but even beyond that, if you look at who the people are, who the farmers are, historically they were doing rotational farming or slash and burn agriculture. What it would look like if they didn't take care of their environment. All these things started to click where they really wanted to do it. So we never incentivized doing these practices. We just talk about them long enough to where if somebody actually showed interest, then we could give them the full package. And Setapoung was one of the first. I mean, specifically, Mr. Gee, who's on the bag of Onda, he really took a shine to it very early on and started doing it without many of the other farmers doing the practices. And it's just kind of built on that relationship that he's trying to understand more of what he does as a farmer for himself. I know that's a huge portion, is that his kids learn these kinds of things before they, end up taking over the farm. It's been interesting. They're the more, I would say, eyes open, or they're the more progressive farmers that see value in long term, which is a really hard thing to do in communities that traditionally don't think long term. Everything that we do, and Onda signed on to it right away. They're a perfect partner for this. But in the global coffee trade, it's not to toot our own horn, but I have not really seen traceability like we do, and we kind of do radical traceability. Almost anywhere you go, it stops at some middleman. And even if there is traceability on certain value chains that go to a farmer, there's not comprehensive traceability on everything not involved with the sale. So like, for instance, Onda buys the green beans and there's absolute traceability on how many cents they pay, how many dollars they pay, exactly how much that goes to the exact producer. But the more critical thing as well is, while we're here on the ground, what was lost in the milling process. Even a lot of people say, okay, the farmer gets paid this, but there's not verification that a farmer is receiving in their hand this value. There's usually they're not lying, it's just they don't have the data. So they're just like, okay, farmers got paid $3. But when you look at it, the farmer really only got $1.25. Because you look, okay, through this structure, there's this management that takes this cut. And then there's this middleman that was the one that connected this farmer to the group, and they took this cut and this cut and this cut. We do this level of transparency, really not for the buyers at all. I instituted this kind of transparency just so farmers could start to see where they're being stolen from. And this actually doesn't make us very popular in the coffee industry in and of itself, both in origin and to be honest, in the American market. So the European market is much more amenable to what we do, but in the American market, there's a lot of companies that actually don't like to see this dirty business. They want to think that what they're doing is the correct procedure, and that's it. They don't want to know that there's still holes in the system, and it raises more issues that they have to then deal with. Because, a lot of coffee companies are just in it for the coffee. But what we do is, we're not here to value the coffee. So even with the farmers, the coffee is not the value, the people are the value. The coffee is just a vehicle that we use to direct value to the people. And so we try and flip the whole value chain to where you don't value coffee, you value community more than coffee. And you use the coffee to empower the community rather than we use the community to supply our coffee. So it's kind of this ethical dilemma if you look at the predominant market in and of itself. And to really deal with that, we've had to have this radical traceability. It's a pretty simple concept once it's explained, but let's take an average farmer and they bring in, a ton of coffee. Unless they're doing absolute amazing picking, you'll see anywhere from 25 to 30% of all that. So like 300 kilos of a ton is defect, meaning it'll most likely be told to the farmer that, oh, it's defective and we won't pay you for that. But they won't give it back to the farmers. So the farmers lose 30%. They lose that 300 kilos. It's just effectively seen as nothing. It's worth zero. However, when you're in the processing business, That's actually where most people make their money. A lot of the millers and middlemen that operate the mills, because of course farmers rarely have the financial ability to have all of the processing equipment themselves, they'll take their parchment to a mill and they'll get back clean coffee and the defects are just gone. They go, oh, yeah, yeah, you know, that's part of our payment, whatever. It's not worth anything. We'll figure out something to do with it, because the farmers don't have access to buyers either for green or for defects. So it's just considered a loss to most places. But like even here in Laos, when we started working with the first group, you know, we were finding that there was about $200 to $250,000 worth of defects that was just going poof into the hands of 3 private individuals. And once you really start uncovering that, you're saying, look, guys, this is 20% increase just in your base income without quality, without anything. You're missing out on 20% of your annual earnings just from those defects, and they are yours. You own that, and you have the right to be able to get that back. Defects is a really contentious one, because that's a super dirty secret of the industry that they really don't like farmers to understand, because of course defects are valuable, and there's varying grades of defects. So you can get anywhere from under $1 to $2 for defect, which is insane. $2 for a kilogram of defects. That's effectively like having clean coffee. It gets taken away because farmers have no idea. Defects will get sold to places like Nestle or instant coffee factories. So anywhere that makes instant coffee, they take defects. So any instant coffee you drink comes from the worst trash. It's called grade X, but it just comes from the worst trash that you can find. Super cheap, they process it, and it becomes an extremely valuable product. So it has one of the highest profit margins of any coffee product. Lao coffee in and of itself is inherently very sweet. So Setapoung is really interesting because every year we always get this characteristic strawberry note every year, no matter what. And so you get this really almost like candy strawberry cup, and it's really quite pleasant. And again, it depends on how you roast it. If you roast it darker, then it's really sweet. You get a lot of jammy notes, but you know, then it's more chocolatey, and you get really, really sweet caramel and kind of like almondine or almond paste. So you can modify it how you roast it. But for me, it's the sweetness, and for Setapoung, it's the cleanliness. Like, it's the cleanest cup every year. They pick the best, they dry the best, they put more attention into their coffee than any of the other villages. It may not be the most exciting profile. Nobody puts the heart in like Setapoung. You know, I commonly say their coffee is as sweet as their community because they are the sweetest people. They're always in the best of moods, and it's really pleasant to be around them and work with them. I've seen them produce in years where it was terrible. I've seen them get stolen by, you know, and people steal their money. You know, at the top, we've had to fight multiple levels of management that have come and gone, that have tried to steal or have stolen, and we'd have to rebuild the structure from the bottom up. And they continue to fight for this because they understand what they're doing. So it's not just the money. The money is absolutely why they're doing it, at least for the coffee. But when they don't have the money, they still do this. And it's not because they expect to get paid. They just know it's the right thing. And they know that there's a better chance that something positive will come out of that than if they just sit back and let whatever happen. We've seen a very different motivation happen as greedy people come in and out and try and collapse their system. They know that there's value in the system, and it's beyond the money. It's them being able to kind of determine for themselves, what are they going to do with their crop? It's their crop. It's not the middleman's. It's their market. It's not the middleman's. They built these trade lines with the United States. They built these trade lines with Europe. They're theirs. They're not anybody else's. And that's something that they have to protect. Even if it's bad for 5 years or 10 years, these are things that they have to protect for their children, because they're most likely still going to be farming. Truly, the thing that separates the coffee, the Lao specialty coffee that we work with, and everything else is the reason why the coffee exists. It's not who, what, where, when. It's the why. Why is that coffee with Onda? Why is that coffee on a ship going to Europe? Why is it there? And that's where all the difference is. Yes, we can talk about coffee profiles, but it's the whole why. What these small groups of farmers are doing here, hopefully it's something that other countries, other producer groups can end up learning from. My dream would be to see Lao actually have a little bit of prestige in its ability to help other people understand how they can treat themselves and act with dignity in the market and be respected in the market as farmers. rather than them being the lowest person on the totem pole. You know, the why is the most important. I mean, they're trying to build something for themselves, but the implications that it would have for millions of other farmers, they can figure this out. If they can do this, if they can break past 3, 4, 500 years of colonialization and systemization, you know, it's a systemic thing. The industry itself isn't bad. It's just structured very horribly. And if these farmers can figure out a way and really bridge the gap with consumers and with markets and say, hey, look, people are the important thing here. Like the coffee comes, but the coffee is a celebration of our relationship, not the other way around. They can do something like that. Oh man, that would be, yeah, that'd be why I'm here.